I ask every nominee who comes before any of the committees on which I sit the following two initial questions that go to fitness to serve by the nominee. I'll ask you, Mr. Bovi, since you became a legal adult, have you made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
No.
In the February 23rd, 2025 report in Politico, the title was, quote, before he became Trump's bulldog, Emil Bovi was nearly demoted for bellicose management style, end quote. According to this article, which was put into the record, when you served as a unit chief at the Southern District of New York, and I'm again quoting this article, Mr. Bovi quickly garnered a reputation as a manager who was sharply critical of the people who worked for him and unable to control his anger. His conduct was abusive, according to one former member of the unit.
Welcome back to America First, Patriots. I'm your host, and if you're tired of the establishment games and want real talk about what's happening in our government, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're building a community of Americans who put our country first, and I need your help to spread the message. Today, we're breaking down the Senate confirmation hearing for Emil Bove, and folks, what we're witnessing here is exactly why the American people voted for change. This hearing perfectly encapsulates the difference between the old guard establishment and the new America First movement.
Are you familiar with this article?
I am.
Okay. So going on, according to this article, in 2020 or early 2021, the Executive Committee of the U.S. Attorney's Office opened a formal inquiry into Bovi's management style. They interviewed prosecutors who worked for him about his behavior, and they decided that he should be removed from his role as a supervisor, end quote. Of course, you are aware of this inquiry and their recommendation.
As
Yes?
well as the fact
No?
that I was not removed.
Yes?
I was not removed, Senator.
Can you speak into the mic so we can all hear your answers, please?
I apologize. I was not removed, Senator.
I know you were not removed because the article goes on to say that when this committee decided to demote you and remove you, you pleaded with them to allow you to remain in your job, and you pledged that you would commit to improving your behavior. Did you do that? Did you request they not remove you? Did you plead that you not be removed and that you would change your behavior?
That characterization is not accurate, Senator.
So you did not change your behavior at all, or did you?
Senator, I'm not perfect, and so when I get constructive criticism, I absolutely...
Speak into the mic, please.
When I get constructive criticism, I absolutely take account of that and try and be better at my job. And I did that in that instance. But the characterization in that article by anonymous sources from a whisper campaign from SDNY alums is not accurate.
The fact of the matter is, though, this committee did talk to people who worked for you, and they concluded that you engaged in abusive behavior and that you should be removed, but you got to stay. And the article, you disagree with the characterization, but why would they go through all this trouble to investigate and all of that, and they let you stay? Unless I hope that you had said, well, you would change your behavior. Because the attitude, the behavior of a judge, I think is, that is important for us to understand. During your time as a supervisor in the Southern District of New York, you supervised a team that prosecuted U.S. v. Alisater. You supervised them.
Yes.
And in that case, prosecutors failed to disclose evidence to the point where, even though there was a judgment of guilty, So it resulted in the jury's verdict being overturned and the charges dropped, and the district court wrote, which I think is pretty unusual, that there was, and I quote the district court, insufficient supervision. You acknowledged just now that you were the supervisor. Insufficient supervision of disclosure obligations by the USAO's unit chiefs. Do you recall the court making that assessment of your supervisory
I do,
capability?
Senator, and I respect Judge Nathan, and I think that what she was trying to accomplish in that decision was to make sure that there were protections in place.
Okay,
so that-
I am running out of time. I just wanted to do, you had said that the January 6 prosecutions were a grave injustice. So does that mean that you agreed with President Trump's pardon of all of the convicted felons?
I am not in a position as a nominee, Senator, to comment on any president's use of the pardon power, which is committed to presidents.
Once again, I should think that because you characterize those prosecutions as a grave injustice, I would think that you would be happy that the president pardoned everybody. Thank you.
Senator Hall.
Let me start with what's really happening here. We have a nominee who served in the Southern District of New York, which, as many of you know, has been ground zero for some of the most politically motivated prosecutions we've seen in recent years. The Southern District has been weaponized against conservatives, and now we're seeing someone who was part of that system potentially moving into a higher position. The senator is grilling Bovi about his management style, and here's what's interesting. According to a Politico report, there was a formal inquiry into his conduct as a supervisor. The executive committee actually recommended he be removed from his supervisory role because of what they called abusive behavior. But here's the kicker: he wasn't removed. This tells us something about how these institutions protect their own when it serves their purposes. Now, Bovi is denying the characterization and calling it a whisper campaign from Southern District alumni. But let's be real here, patriots. When multiple prosecutors are interviewed about your behavior and a committee recommends your removal, that's not just anonymous gossip. That's a pattern of conduct that should concern every American who believes in accountability. What's even more telling is the case supervision issue. Under Bovi's supervision, prosecutors in the case against someone involved with FTX failed to disclose evidence properly. The result? A jury verdict was overturned and charges were dropped. The district court specifically cited insufficient supervision. This isn't just about management style anymore. This is about competence and ensuring justice is served properly. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is why I think this hearing matters so much to our movement. The senator brings up January 6 prosecutions, which Bovi apparently called a grave injustice. Now, when asked about President Trump's pardons of those convicted in relation to January 6, Bovi suddenly can't comment on presidential pardon power. This is classic establishment behavior. Folks, when it serves their narrative, they'll make strong statements about prosecutions being unjust. But when pressed on whether they support the president's constitutional authority to correct those injustices, they hide behind procedural excuses about not being able to comment as a nominee. Let me be clear about something. The January 6 prosecutions were absolutely a grave injustice. We saw American citizens who walked through open doors, who were waved in by Capitol Police, who took selfies and stayed within the rope lines, treated like domestic terrorists. Meanwhile, we watched cities burn during the summer of 2020 with minimal consequences for those who actually engage in violence and destruction. The fact that President Trump uses constitutional authority to pardon these Americans is exactly why we elected him. He's cleaning up the mess left by a weaponized justice system that targeted patriotic Americans while ignoring real crime in our cities. But back to Bovi. What concerns me most is this pattern we keep seeing. Someone gets called out for problematic behavior. There's an investigation. Recommendations are made, but then nothing happens because they're protected by the system. Then, when they're nominated for higher positions, they claim the criticism was unfair or exaggerated. This is exactly the kind of swamp behavior that President Trump was elected to drain. We need people in positions of authority who understand that they serve the American people, not the other way around. We need leaders who can take criticism, acknowledge mistakes, and actually change their behavior, not just give lip service to improvement while continuing the same patterns. The Southern District of New York has been a thorn in the side of conservatives for years. They've gone after President Trump, his associates, and other America First leaders with an intensity that was clearly politically motivated. Now we're supposed to trust that someone who was part of that system has suddenly changed? I'm not saying Emil Bovi is a bad person, but I am saying that his record raises serious questions about whether he's the right person to serve in a position of greater authority. The American people deserve better than more of the same establishment figures who talk about accountability when it's convenient, but can't give straight answers when pressed on the issues that matter most to our constitutional republic. Here's what I want you to take away from this. Patriots. Elections have consequences, and the people we put in positions of power matter. Every confirmation hearing, every appointment, every decision made by these officials affects real Americans. We can't afford to rubber stamp nominees just because they say the right things in prepared statements. We need to demand better. We need to hold these people accountable not just for their policy positions, but for their character, their track record, and their willingness to serve the American people rather than protect the establishment that's been failing us for decades. The fact that this hearing is even happening shows that we're making progress. The old days of nominees sailing through without tough questions are over, but we need to keep the pressure on. We need to make sure that anyone who serves in our government understands that they work for us, not the other way around. That's why channels like America First matter. That's why your engagement matters. When you like, subscribe, and share these videos, you're helping to build a movement that holds our government accountable. You're helping to ensure that the America First message reaches more patriots who are tired of the establishment games. So, what do you think, America First family? Should Emil Bovi be confirmed, or do these management and supervision issues disqualify him from serving in a higher position? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, if you want to stay informed about what's really happening in our government, make sure you're subscribed to America First. We're here to give you the analysis the mainstream media won't provide. Until next time, keep fighting for America. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.